Good afternoon. Driving home. I made reference yesterday to a story about 1998 being a good year for me. I started my company, Rack and Roll, in February of 97 and had no money. Actually had no gear, hardly. But I had a list of people that had equipment. And so I primarily started Rack and Roll, kind of like brokering other people's equipment for rental. And then whatever the hot piece of gear was, I would save that money and then buy with cash. I would buy whatever the piece of gear that was lighting the phones up. And then all of a sudden you're making 100% instead of 25. I would give whoever owned the piece of gear, I would give them the 75%, keep 25%. And I didn't pay myself for like a year and a half. I just put all the money back into gear, trying to build up my inventory. So 1998 rolls around, and Curb Records, who is like one of my longest clients, not my first client. My first client was Monroe Jones and Jim Deneen, and I never forget you guys. I love you like family. But Curb Records has been one of my oldest clients, most valued clients, and we have a great long-standing relationship that I really value. So it was sometime, March, April of 98, and there was a real nice guy that worked in the tape room at Curb Records. His name was Steve West, and I haven't seen him in years. I would love to find that guy one day and thank him. So, my buddy Steve ran the tape room at Curb at the time, and, he knew it was pretty lean and I didn't really have clients. And so he would call me randomly and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And, I would just say, "Oh, waiting for the phone to ring." And so he would be like, "Hey, why don't you come up here and help, make cassette copies and charge me good money for your effort." And so I would go up there and hang out and help in the tape room, right? My pager, I didn't have a phone actually at the time. I had a pager. That was very convenient. So, my pager would go off, I would leave. And it was great to have that fill-in work. But what proved to be way more valuable than the hourly work he was providing were the people that were coming and going out of their studio there. And so I walk in one day, and there was a producer named Chuck Howard at the time. Chuck was kind of like vice president and the head of A&R, and he had signed LeAnn Rimes and several other people for the label, and we produced their records. And he was a great guy. He's what I call a colorful character in the music business, right? And so anyway, I walk in, and Chuck is having a phone call, like very intense phone call. And, I'm kind of eavesdropping what's going on. And, I hear the name Diane Warren. And, I kind of surmise what's going on here is LeAnn Rimes had recorded a song for the Con Air soundtrack called "How Do I Live." This song Diane Warren had written. And I guess Jerry Bruckheimer was the producer of Con Air. And I guess because of her age and the lyrical content in the song, they didn't think it was they didn't find it to be appropriate for somebody her age to be singing some of, these lyrics. So, Chuck gets off the phone, and basically he's talking to Wilbur Rimes, who's LeAnn's dad. And I think Mike Curb might have been there. I can't remember. Your memory gets fuzzy after 30 years. But anyway, long story short, they're having this conversation about, hey, Diane Warren's attorney says we can still put this song out, but, someone else is going to record it. Well, me working in all these various studios, I had a friend at the time that was managing a studio called the Sound Kitchen. And I knew that she had held some time for Tony Brown and Chuck Ainley to come in and cut Trisha Yearwood's version. And the Curb folks didn't know this, right? I knew this. It's just kind of inside baseball, just from, being around every day. I would run in and out of all, it was very common at those days. I might be in and out of 10, 12, 15 studios a day. So it really kind of gave you a good sense of what's going on around town. So anyway, I had this knowledge, and I especially as a young guy, I was more keep to myself, don't speak, and less spoken to. But thank God I spoke up, and I looked at those guys and I said, hey, they had said previously, we hear someone is going to record this song. And so I just spoke up and said, actually, Trisha Yearwood's going to record it, and they're doing it at Sound Kitchen next Thursday. So, you want to talk about the right information at the right time. It was good information to have at the right time. And I, kind of explained to them how I knew this, and, walked away trying to be helpful. And so this conversation keeps going on about, well, we could send a CD to radio first, but, I think the lead time to get a CD single, they had been quoted, like 4 or 5 weeks. And so they didn't see that as a viable option. Well, I had seen these advertisements for these CD burners, multi-tower, multi-disc burners. And I'd kind of wanted to become a dealer anyway, because I thought every publishing company in Nashville needed one of these. And I think I'd even reached out to the company, kind of started a relationship, right? I think I'd maybe filled out some paperwork to be a dealer, but I didn't have the money to buy a unit yet, so I hadn't bought one. So anyway, I very meekly chimed back in with the solution. I said, hey, I sell these CD towers. We could get one here. We could burn these CDs ourselves, and then, we could do that in a matter of a week. So, Chuck Howard spins around, looks at me, and was like, whatever it costs, make it happen, right? So, that afternoon I sprung into action. I think the first burner I sold them might have been 4 bays. It was 4 or 6, but I think it was 4. And man, I think it was like $12,000. And so sent an invoice in the next day. They paid it quickly. I ordered this thing overnight. We get it there. And so I have this CD single, this mix. I think Mick Gazowski had mixed the pop mix of How Do I Live for LeAnn Rimes. And so we started burning CDs ourselves. Me and Chuck's assistant, Jeff, started burning these CDs. And this, I think we were burning these at like 4 times speed. So the song was 3.5 minutes. So like every, minute or so, the CD would spit out. We had printed these paper CD labels. We'd put a paper label on it. And, then we would put it in a CD wallet. And there was a FedEx drop right across the street, which was very convenient. So I don't know, this went on for like days where we're just burning CDs around the clock. And, I think I made a little money selling on the CD burner, and, obviously charging for my hourly time. So, this gets done. I go away, I disappear. That song, the result of our efforts of doing that was they beat Trisha to radio, and LeAnn had a pop hit with that song, How Do I Live. In fact, check me on this, but I believe it, until Celine Dion, My Heart Will Go On, I believe it was the largest selling single of all time, some crazy record like that, whatever it was. And Trisha had a #1 country song with it, but it went up the charts and peaked at #1 and fell really quickly. And I think LeAnn's went like 57, 58, 60 weeks, and massive pop hit. And, you know, I had this small hand of having the right information at the right time. You know, they were able to print those themselves, beat radio, you know, get theirs to radio first. But I didn't think much of it, just good opportunity. Well, fast forward 6 or 8 weeks, and this producer at Curb, Chuck Howard, he called and, you know, he said, hey, we want to buy kind of 2 of everything for the studio, and we want you to sell it to us. And, you know, we know you'll give us a good deal, but make sure you take care of yourself. So, you know, at the time, so I start trying to find all these vintage microphones and all this old equipment that they wanted. And, you know, at the time, the internet wasn't fully formed, right? There were what we called news groups that you could search to find vintage recording equipment. And so I'm literally spending all day long on these news groups looking for recording equipment. And I made a lot of great connections, actually. Connections that still to this day, people I know I met in those early days of doing that. And so basically for about a year, I was constantly on the look, buying gear and selling it to them. And we kind of did a Noah's Ark vintage mic collection. We kind of did 2 of everything, sequential serial number pairs. I mean, it was just a meticulous mic collection. And then what I would do is whatever money I had made from selling those, I would use it to buy something I needed. And so very quickly, I was able to build my inventory up where I owned what people were renting, which, you know, I don't have to tell anyone. All of a sudden, you're highly profitable if you're making 100% instead of 75%, right? And so anyway, this continued. I think it was about a year where they just kept buying anything, you know, that would come up, they would want. And so I did this. And so then what happened is all these manufacturers start coming to me because I'm buying all this equipment, wanting me to be a dealer for all these things. And I was honest with all these manufacturers. I'm like, hey, this is a mega client, you know, this level of buying probably isn't sustainable. And, you know, quite honestly, people appreciate honesty when you're honest like that. And they were like, well, we don't care. You seem, you know, like a good guy to know, and we want you to represent our products. So now all of a sudden we're able to rent and sell all these dealer lines. And it was because of that LeAnn Rimes single. And, you know, still to this day, it's the basis of so much of what we're able to do was from that. So anyway, hope that's an interesting story. You know, I have lived my life in the music business. I call it on the sidelines, right? Where I'm not always an active participant, but I'm on the service side of the music industry, right? So I love it because I always say, you know, I'm kind of sitting on the 50-yard line. I'm not on the football field, but I'm up in the bleachers eating popcorn on the 50-yard line. And the vantage point, what you're able to see sitting up that high, is really informative. So anyway, there's another story. I hope everybody's having a great day.